I've always believed in magic and in the kindness of strangers. Dictionary defines magic as the use of special powers to make things happen that would usually be impossible. So I suppose by this definition, my parents are pretty magical people. My first memory of my dad's magic was when he came back from traveling to South America and brought me a pair of white sneakers. I was a pretty fast runner in school, but after I put these sneakers on, I became the fastest runner in school. I was faster than the boys even. I would run to my parents and say, "These sneakers make me run so fast, Mira, look!" And I'd keep running. Once in a while, I would stop with bright-eyed curiosity to watch the neighborhood boys catch lizards. They would tie the end of the tail onto a wooden stick and then slowly lower the lizard into a hole in the ground. After about 1 to 2 minutes, they would take what was left of the lizard out, and ta-da! It would be all bone. The skinny, bony leftovers of a giant spider that lived inside the earth. Sometimes, on the weekends, we would go to the countryside of Cuba, where my mom grew up. I would ride on the horse carriages and would always want to sit next to the driver, so I could watch the horses. One time, a driver said to me in a serious tone, "When a horse pees, it rains, and when it poops, it thunders." And being on a tropical island where it could easily rain on and off for, every 10 minutes, I believe him. I still think horses are the most magical creatures on earth. My tia Lily used to visit us quite frequently in Cuba. She would usually bring me dresses. Sometimes she would visit with my American cousins. They had blonde hair and blue eyes because of their father, so I always thought that was the ideal, blonde hair and blue eyes. I always wanted to see Miami. Whoa, okay. I'm just kidding. Okay. Blonde hair and blue eyes. Okay. I always wanted to see Miami, and I thought it was a faraway land that could only be reached in my dreams. I thought that when I went there, I would all of a sudden be tall with blonde flowing hair and blue eyes. One time, I stopped at a neighbor's house who pretended to be a fairy godmother to turn me into my ideal after I showed her a postcard of what I thought to be the perfect American girl. I ran to the bathroom after she did her abracadabra on me, and seeing I still had hair and eyes of azabache, which is a term used to describe really dark horses, and tan skin, I was heartbroken. I cried. That is to say, I always wanted to be something other than myself. My neighbor's magic trick didn't work on me. However, my wish of going to Miami did come true a few months later. My parents packed our things like we were going to the beach. So to me, it was a regular beach day. Me and my sister couldn't suspect anything because we had been too excited not to share with our grandparents. My mom brought a Russian camera on her shoulder, my father a small bag, my sister wore a dress, I wore a rainbow jumpsuit over my red bathing suit. As we played and splashed in the sun, smothered water, my mom said in a soft voice, "We're going to visit your tia Lily in Miami." I don't remember how I felt specifically, perhaps reacted in the same way I would when I found out they were visiting us. I was elated, yet aware of the pain of an inevitable goodbye. As the sun began to fade, we started to walk into what seemed like a dark jungle. We walked and walked, surrounded by the light of visiting fireflies. Slowly, people started to join us in the dark, and we moved in silence, like in a pilgrimage to visit a secret saint somewhere. We were 10 people in total now, and walking through pantanos, or getting bit by all sorts of bugs, and basically still wearing our bathing suits. I was on a tall man's shoulders as we walked, which meant I could see higher than anyone. I could feel the salty night air on my face. My sister was with my dad. We continued to walk until we reached the point where we would meet the boat and be collected. All this had to be done in complete silence because the Cuban Coast Guard was heavily enforced around that time, and they circled around in boats. We reached some rocks where we would hide and wait. We waited and waited in a night as dark as my hair. Perhaps someone mentioned going back or giving up, and my dad began to scream into the night. In silence, he made fists and punched the earth. He punched the face of night. That was the only time I felt fear, that night. Suddenly, he grabbed a small flashlight and decided to flash it into the water. If the boat was there, then great, and if not, then well, who knows? Turn back or go to jail, I guess. We got into the water. He only needed to flash the light once to see that the boat was about 10 feet away from us. We got into the water quietly and walked to this small wooden boat with 2 engines. 2 engines means we were really lucky. We went really fast. We were flying through the water like fish escaping from a shark's mouth. At least it felt that way. I was in the corner of the boat, strapped in the arms of a big woman who kept telling me everything's going to be all right. I think after a while she was more talking to herself than to me. My mom was throwing up her pass in the side of the boat. My dad held my sister. I couldn't see them. I looked up at the stars and thought they might be following us in a hurry. After about 3 hours, the sun began to rise, and suddenly the motor stopped as we reached a small piece of sand. We were dropped off there. The men driving the boat gave us apples and apple juice. I explored this tiny island with my sister as we waited for something to happen. My dad saw a small shark and began to chase it. We laughed. I don't know how many hours later a fisherman passed by and saw us. He called the U.S. Coast Guard. In a little while, we were on our way to Key West, where we did all the required paperwork. The U.S. Coast Guard guys gave me and my sister a little tiny dinosaur with green hair. I still have them somewhere. We were covered in bug bites, and apparently I got some sort of rash on my skin that lasted for weeks, yet I don't remember any of that. I only remember the purple dinosaur. We moved in with the Alili, and I would spend a lot of time watching Power Rangers and eating pizza nuggets with my blonde, blue-eyed cousin, who became increasingly jealous of my skinny body and my dark hair and my tan skin. Soon I began to realize that I missed my grandparents, eating guayabas with my cousin, my best friend Monica, the neighborhood boys, the park next to our building. I even missed the jellyfish on the beach. I became terrified that just like we left my grandparents, I too would be left. That everyone would leave without saying goodbye. Perhaps the best remedy for loneliness is to believe in something bigger than yourself. My parents have never been very religious, and honestly neither am I, though we all sort of grew up Catholic. Cuba has an underlying belief. It comes from the Afro-Cuban practices of Santeria, which means that whether you believe it or not, if you're born Cuban, you will always be superstitious about certain things you randomly heard or knew people or saw people do without any real explanation. For example, never walk barefoot on the floor. That is how you pick up bad energy. Place a glass of water on the highest point in your house so that the spirits could drink. When you get sick, haz una limpieza, which means you need a clearing or a cleansing. You need someone to come over to your house and do some abracadabra. Perhaps they will bring a giant tobacco and some rum, because the smoke cleans the air and, well, the Santos love rum. So about 12 years later, when I was living in New York, I found myself in a moment in life when I needed a connection to myself and my roots. I was feeling lonely and lost. I just couldn't find my magic. I heard my ancestors whisper in my ear, haz una limpieza. At the time, I knew this kind-eyed, wise, older Mexican man named Don Chuy, who worked with me in a Cuban restaurant. He would always have the most magical solutions for every problem, and had been practicing Santeria for most of his life, which means he was now a master, so to speak. Naturally, one day, I asked him to come over to my apartment in Washington Heights and do some abracadabra on me. He didn't bring any tobacco or rum. Turns out all we needed was a coconut, which I bought at the nearest bodega, some black and red paint, and a little notebook. I painted the coconut half black and half red, placed it on a white little plate on top of a red cloth next to my door. It represents El Egua, the santo who opens doors, or helps you when you feel lost, or when you need a door, when you need new perspectives. He also represents birth and death. So he must be placed next to the door you always walk in and out of, said Don Chuy. After that day, this coconut has never left my side. I have brought it with me on my travels, sometimes if I move to a new place temporarily where it might seem kind of weird to walk in with a coconut. I leave it in the car. But for the most part, I have it with me. I feed it honey when I talk to it because, well, Don Chuy told me the saints love honey. To me, when I look at it, it is more than a coconut. Like, you know, when Tom Hanks sells at it, that soccer ball, in that movie Castaway that disappears. It represents my connection to something bigger, to my ancestors, to Cuba. I talk to it when no one else listens, when I'm afraid or anxious or happy. And in this space, nothing is ever lost. No one ever says goodbye. And the magic is in the everyday. It's in everyone. It's in everything.